The State Library has so many fascinating collections, but we decided for this, we're going to narrow it down to what are the online legislative and government resources, because they're popular, they're huge, they're layered, and they're growing. So, while the library is closed, we thought it would be a good idea for you to see what we have available now in the library. So, joining me today for the State Library's online legislative and government resources in a nutshell are reference librarians Alexandra Bernson, and Caitlin Conley. They're going to take you into the detail of the resources as we move further along here. So, our focus today is on the mission of the State Library, a reminder of what is the mission of the State Library. Where would you begin to find the online legislative and government resources? Beginning with our website, a little bit about that, and then we're going to delve deeper into the State Library's digital repository. From there, I'm going to hand it off to Alex, who will talk about legislative resources, show you where they are in DSpace, and then she's also going to go over government resources. And then from there, she's going to hand it off to Caitlin, who will talk about regulatory research. And then she's going to just touch on some of the collections and special collections that are used a lot, frequently asked for when it comes to legislative histories or government sources. So we've packed a lot in here today. And just a reminder of our mission at the State Library, because it really is connected to everything that we're talking about today. The State Library of Massachusetts supports the research and information needs of government, libraries, and people through innovative services and access to a comprehensive repository of state documents and other historical items. We're also designated as a depository library for Massachusetts state publications, current and historic, print, and digital. And we also have a section in the Mass General Laws. If you want to read a little about that, you're welcome to. So that's basically the mission of the State Library of Massachusetts. So now we're getting closer to the sources, the resources. I just want to touch on a couple of things to begin to find the sources. Our library website is mass.gov/LIB. On your right-hand side of the screen is basically our prime real estate. I'm not going to go into major searches here because you are all librarians, but I just want to touch upon the catalog just for a bit. We belong to CW Mars, which is one of the Massachusetts Library Consortiums. A lot of those libraries that we're joined with are in Western Mass, public libraries and academic libraries. So we use Evergreen, an open source software for our catalog. And what I want to say about our catalog is we catalog all our, besides the print materials that we're cataloging, we catalog the online version of it too. We put it in the catalog. So if you do find yourself in the catalog one day and you're wondering if there is, if the item is in the catalog, you would see it already in the catalog, online access, and a link to get to it. So that's just a little about our catalog. What I'm going to move along here and go into is show you our law resources webpage. Just a little bit about the blog, a little about Ask a Librarian, and then we are moving full speed ahead to the State Library's digital repository. And go to our website. Should look pretty familiar to you all. It is packed, and obviously since we're working, teleworking, how to access us. But I'm getting back to that prime real estate. And what I want to show you here is that you can access the blog, we'll be going into the digital repository soon. But up here, it's just a shortcut. I know some of you guys use the same Drupal software. There's only so many bits of information that we can put in the best area. So I just wanted to show you a shortcut. If you go to I Want To, that's where you can access the catalog. But today, I am going to the Law Resources collection, which will start at Learn About the Library's Collections. This is, again, jam-packed, but it starts to, you scroll down some more, and then under what do you need to know as it begins to talk about collections, the first one is the Massachusetts Law Resources in the State Library. Again, a very long page. If you know exactly what you're looking for, you can click on the table of contents and it will take you right there. For the sake of today, I am just want to show you that what we do have on this page, because it pretty much highlights and gives a little summary of what we do have and where do you begin and what is it all about. So we have the Massachusetts statutes and legislative materials, which are the acts and resolves, let you know from what dates we have, what do we have in print, what is in the digital repository. We talk about the Mass General laws, what editions we do have, and where would you find non-official online version of it. We have the House and Senate journals, again, dates, print, where you can find them. And as I scroll down here through legislative documents, letting you see what we have and where you can begin, and a link to the depository. What I want to highlight basically about our website is what we have been doing during the spring and summer, and what we continue to do is we want to build out more about these collections, whether we build out a whole web page or we're making tutorial videos about these resources. All of us here know what these are, but when we're working with patrons or we're brand new to the field and we're learning, being able to define and sort out the difference and figure out how these resources are related, that's our goal with these videos. So we're really making them very concise and visual, and we're hoping that it helps out folks that are using our resources. So we started with what's a bill, Act, MGR, what's MGL, sorry, and CMR. And we just made one about how to use the House and Senate journals. So we have them here, and we also have them on our YouTube channel. And we're planning to do more of this. As you'll see later on in the presentation, the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, Caitlin built out a website that gives much more detail about a little about the history and how to use it. And she also goes into other Massachusetts registers. So this page is just a starter to let you all know what we have. And just mention the blog. Pretty much, we've been writing the blog for about 10 years now. And if you are interested in, it could be a legislator, it could be a certain event, it could be how do I search for a bill, if you want more text about how do I use the House and Senate journals, there's probably a blog post about it. So I encourage you to use the blog post and check it out. And if you ever have any recommendations about a blog post, let me know about that too. Ask a Librarian, I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to the trial court librarians that helped let me talk to them about the chat that they use, and I picked up the same one, so I thank you very much. I also, we've been using it quite a bit, and we hope it gets more popular. We also have our reference email, and that's for more detailed, more complicated questions that need more time. So that's a little about our website. I am going to talk to you now about the State Library's digital repository. So the State Library's digital repository. eSpace is the software we use for the repository platform. I know when we're talking with patrons, and sometimes we're using the lingo quickly and back and forth, but sometimes patrons, they need more explanation. So that's just a little about that. We've been using DSpace for 11 years. It's evolved over the years. It will continue to evolve. We have some ideas in the near future. DSpace is updated daily. You can see the recently viewed items on the front page of DSpace. As you scroll down, it will say recently added materials. This will be added to DSpace. And just a little bit about numbers. Currently, we have over 735,000 items in DSpace. It's probably, I did this slide a while ago, we're probably up to 750,000 items. But just in fiscal year 2020, we added over 24 items in DSpace. And we've had over 1.5 views just in fiscal year 2020. And honestly, that's kind of low. Statistics, I don't know on your ends, but I know with government websites have been completely overwhelmed, and getting statistics straight has been a challenge this year, whether it's with MassGov or keeping track of DSpace too. So I expect these numbers to go up. And what's also nice about DSpace is that you can get you can print out a PDF format of the material, whether it's a map. Most of it's in PDF form, whether it's a map, a document, a report, it's available in PDF. So a little more about DSpace before we get into it, the organization of DSpace. When you go to the front page, you'll see communities and collections on the right. This is the front page of DSpace. You need to select a community to browse its collections. So the Acts and Resolves is its own community because it's huge, and Alex will go into more detail about how it's organized. Other collections are organized hierarchically by state agency. So for example, the library falls under the Executive Office of Administration and Finance. So Administration and Finance is its own community. Executive Office of Administration and Finance is its own community. And when you click on that, the State Library is one of the collections within this community. So all of these are indexed, and you can find them in a Google search. Sometimes people do find it easier in a Google search than they do going to DSpace. That's the reason why we're hoping that this presentation helps folks out in searching for things. And everything that I just said sounds wonderful, but that's a lot of information. And oftentimes, how many people really know what agency something falls under? And what's wonderful is that DSpace is keyword searchable. And you can use quotation marks when you're using more than one word or a phrase. You can search by title of something or the author. And as you get into a community and as you get into a collection, an advanced search option pops up. And that's where you can put even more specific qualifiers to find what you're looking for, because some of these collections can get even big too. So that's a beginner of DSpace. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Alex so that she can take you into the legislative resources.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Bernson. And as I mentioned, I'm a reference librarian at the State Library of Massachusetts. I'm here today to talk to you specifically regarding the legislative history documents that we have, as well as the government documents that it is our mission to collect. As David mentioned, the vast majority of really what we do at the State Library has to do with legislative research history, or legislative history research, I should say. And our first collections that we put onto DSpace were the Acts and Resolves, the bills or legislative documents. And then recently we were able to get the House and Senate journals online. So all of these things are available online, and we can talk about what involved in all of those in a hot second. And then we'll talk about the government document series. So this is going to include the public document series, which are these numerated, often annual reports by different either historic or current government agencies right now. And then other born digital materials that we are collecting, like meeting minutes. I mean, the government documents are not just reports, they are the minutes, they are newsletters, all of these things that provide a wealth of information, and we collect and are scanning all of them. So often legislative researchers know exactly what they're looking for. So if they have a particular act, a particular bill, something like that, then it's very easy to locate them on DSpace. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. We have acts and resolves going back to 1692 on our website. On DSpace. We have bills and legislative documents going back to 1798. And then, as I mentioned, we recently were able to upload the House and Senate journals, which begin in 1854. The State Library also has manuscript journals. However, those are not yet available online, but we're hoping that they will be very soon. And you'll notice that a lot of these things are our collections for DSpace and in 2010, or for the journals 2016. And that's because they aren't publishing in print a lot of these materials anymore. They're all published online, either officially or unofficially. So for more recent documents, you can go onto the legislature's website, malegislature.gov. You can also go to Westlaw or InstaTrack, also known as MassTrack, to perform legislative histories for things that are, in the last 10 years or so. So as I mentioned, so the collections, Dava said that the bills and the acts and resolves are such massive collections that they aren't hidden away under the legislature's collection, for example. They are their own things because we know these are very high use. So I will show you specifically how to search here. So as I mentioned, if your researcher or you are looking for a particular act and resolve, it's very easy to locate this. You would select the very first collection, Acts and Resolves, right here. Scroll down, say you're looking for chapter 20 of 1950. So we can click on 1950 here. And DSpace likes 4 digits. So instead of just typing in 20, you can do 0020. And that'll pop up right there. And you can see either a PDF or even a text file. If you're not interested in how it's formatted, you just want the bare text, there you go. It's the same thing for bills in that they like the 4 number format. However, if you don't have a number, but say you or your patron is looking for bills that have to do with a particular subject, say bridges in 1980. So you can search by keyword, scroll down to 1980. There we go. And then you can type right in here. And you'll be able to see all of the bills that were filed specifically regarding a specific bridge or bridges in general. This will also search the text of the bill, not just the metadata of the bill, because everything in DSpace is OCR scanned. So any sort of keyword search or phrase search in quotation marks is going to search not just the titles or the metadata of these documents, but also the actual text, which is extremely helpful. But as I mentioned, the vast majority of what we do is legislative history research. And if they aren't looking for just the text, very quick request for a particular act or a particular bill, and they want to do a legislative history, we do have a lot of materials that you can use to perform legislative histories or compile legislative histories online. So just a very quick reminder about the legislative process here in Massachusetts. So very quickly, a bill is introduced to either the House or Senate. It is assigned to committee, and then they vote on that, and then it goes on to the next branch if it is voted on positively. In most cases, it'll be passed along to the governor there, and he will sign it. Or he or she will sign it. Of course, the governor can also veto that particular bill, and then you would have veto messages in the bills or legislative documents, which is why we refer to them as legislative documents, because there's veto messages, reports, a ton of other stuff in there. However, once it is signed by the governor, it becomes an act and then is incorporated into the Mass General Law with very few exceptions, which are known as special acts, which are still current laws, but are just not incorporated into the Mass General Law. We are also able to do legislative histories on special acts, but it's a little more complicated. So you might want to just pass those questions along to us rather than, because we don't have those materials available online just yet. So as I mentioned, the journals have been recently digitized and put online, which is very exciting because they contain a wealth of information for compiling these legislative histories. So the journals are basically like session minutes, like a daily record of what is going on in either the House or the Senate, what bills they're looking at, what they're voting on, etc. And they include a lot of important information. Obviously, the earlier ones in the 1850s and 60s are really just going to be this daily record. But as they evolved through time, they started to include a lot of really fantastic appendices and indexes. So later on, you'll also see the Act Index, which allows you to very quickly identify which bill was signed into which act, which obviously becomes helpful in finding the bill history. There are subject indexes. So just like our Bridges search, you'll be able to see all of the bills that have to do with a particular subject within the House or Senate journal that they looked at during that particular legislative session. Starting in 1970, you also have the bill histories published right in the journals, which is so helpful. Previous to 1970, these are published in the bulletins of committee work, which unfortunately are not yet available online, but again, something that we're hoping to get online very soon. But as far back as 1970, you are able to see a full bill history in these journals, which is fantastic. And then finally, the House journals have the yay nay supplements. So if you or your patron is looking for how a particular legislator voted on a particular bill or during a particular session, you can look at these supplements and see exactly how individuals voted, which is pretty spectacular. So the bill histories, as I mentioned, so 1970 to more or less present, you could find these bill histories in DSpace on in our journals. They can look a little intimidating because it's just a big old block of text there, but don't worry, once you know how to read them, they are not intimidating and they're very easy to understand. So looking at this particular bill history, you'll notice that they'll list new drafts, which is what is highlighted here in yellow. So new drafts substituted for House Bill 6292. So that can be very helpful because while the journals contain all these appendices and the daily record, they don't necessarily contain transcripts of what is being discussed in the House or Senate journal, or in the House and Senate on a given day. And often people are looking for intent. So having these different drafts or even different amendments, which would also be listed in a bill history, is probably the best way that you or your patron can infer intent on a particular bill or act. Again, because they're legislative documents, often or sometimes the legislature will file reports on a particular subject. So these can be relatively rare, but they do happen. So for this report, we can see it's highlighted there in orange. So report C, House Bill 6776. So again, another lovely thing that you can find in these legislative documents collections that can give you an idea of what the intent was. Read first, second, and third, which are highlighted here in green. So this is specific terminology that the legislature uses based on where in the process the bill is. And we can get the videos that we're creating, especially regarding how to use the journals, go more in depth as to what this particular terminology means. But basically read is when it's introduced, second is when it's voted on for the first time, and read third is when it's voted on for the final time and either going to the other legislative branch or over to the governor. You can also see page numbers and dates based on if you want to go look into the actual daily record and see the reference to this particular bill. So they kind of look like bill numbers. So at the very top here, we see this is bill number, House Bill number 6583, but highlighted in blue, we see HJ 2734. So the J is the important part there. That's going to tell you that this is actually a page number and not a different kind of bill. And then finally, in that purple there, we have the act number. So if it is assigned into law, then we have the particular chapter number right there so that they can pull that up here in the acts section as opposed to, you know, our bills and legislative documents collection. So all of that to say, those are the legislative history documents. And again, please let us know if you have any questions or take a look at our website or our videos for more information regarding these. We know that it's a lot of information, but very quickly, we also have the government documents. So as David mentioned, they are organized by agency hierarchy. And these publications include annual reports, which often have in the back relevant legislation that was published that year for that agency or department. They have specialized reports, bulletins, advisories, and newsletters. And we've seen a huge influx of these, especially considering the publications that the government has been putting out regarding, you know, how to deal with COVID-19, and as well as meeting minutes and so much more. So really, we try to capture anything that the government, the Massachusetts state government has been publishing, either online or in print, and making that available on DSpace. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of what Dava was also talking about with the hierarchical organization of the government documents. So first we see in this one over here, the Division of State Parks and Recreation, and we can see the path at the very top, which is something helpful that DSpace does. So starting with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, then DCR, or the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and then this particular division. Again, this is something that you can also just type in Division of State Parks and Recreation into the search bar, and you'd be able to find this collection. But it can be helpful if you might not be familiar with what divisions are in there, or if you're looking for more specialized documents from DCR, it can be helpful to click on through. And then, as I mentioned before, the public document series is a collection of both current and historic, generally annual reports from different types of departments and agencies. One of the most popular that is still being published today is PD 43, also known as the election statistics. And so these are, again, available on DSpace, and we can provide more information regarding what constitutes a public document later on, but we can see the pathway here. They are published by the Secretary of State, so it's under their office, specifically their elections division, and then you'd be able to see a collection of all of these documents going far back. That's all I have here, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Caitlin.
So my name is Caitlin Connolly, and I'm a reference librarian at the State Library of Massachusetts. I'm going to be going over regulatory research in the library, as well as special collections that we have that can help with legislative and government research. So first I'm going to go over and talk about the materials that we have available on site and online that can help with researching regulatory or state regulations. I also want to talk about the library's newest addition to its website, A Guide to Regulatory Research. So most of you guys have probably have experience with this type of research, or have had patrons approach you with questions about regulations. As you know, regulatory research is a bit tedious. It's also really hard to explain, and especially nowadays with a lot of librarians working remotely or not allowing the public on site, it's very difficult to explain over the phone and online as well. So, and also there aren't many good resources available for researching regulations, unlike, you know, legislative research when you have like annotated materials. There's really not too many tools to research state regulations. So to help mitigate this problem, I compiled and created a guide for our website. It's geared towards both new researchers, people who have never even heard of a regulation before or thought much about it. And it's also good for seasoned researchers as well, to kind of get a little bit of a refresher. But it includes an introduction to the CMR, which is the Code of Mass Regulations, It includes important resources to consider when conducting research, as well as links to those resources. And it also, I included some notes, ideas on how to approach this sort of research, as well as caveats that you can run into with this type of research, things that I've run into myself that I'd want a researcher to know. And I'm gonna try and bring up the website. Here it is. Hopefully you guys can see it. So yeah, it's just, it kind of introduces the researcher to the CMR. It breaks down a citation so they understand what the numbers mean. I have a link to the regulations manual, which is the most invaluable resource for understanding the regulatory process, because it's quite different from the legislative process. And kind of breaks down, I'll mention it in a second, the cumulative tables and how to use those, how to handle your research, you know, depending on where you're starting or what you want out of it, as well as other resources available. So this is really great if you have patrons or anybody who is doing this type of research, you know, send them this link. Hopefully help somebody out there. All right, let me go back to my slides. Okay, so the library has many of the official materials on site, and I felt that, you know, I would quickly mention what we have on site for this type of research. We have the Code of Mass Regulations that's updated every 2 weeks, so we make sure to update it. I'm sure when I go back, there's going to be a pile of new filings I'm going to have to do, but I'm not going to think about that right now. We have earlier editions of the CMR as well, because the current is the 3rd edition and there were 2 previous editions prior, and so we have the previous editions on site in paper. We have pre-codified regulations. Those were issued by state agencies before they decided to codify regulations into one single code. So we have, we might not have everything, but we definitely have a lot of pre-codified regulations. We have the Massachusetts registers from issue 1 to current in paper. We have, and also regulatory research can often lead you to researching legislation. So we have the Mass General Laws official and annotated on site, and other state documents that can help with providing insight into regulations and decisions made by agencies. And so we also have resources in DSpace. These are growing resources, and we have the Mass Registers from 2007 to current right now. We have compiled cumulative tables, which is really helpful, a really helpful tool when you're researching regulations. And we have, as David and Alex mentioned, other state documents, over 750,000 to choose from. There's got to be stuff in there. I find stuff all the time in there when I do keyword searches, and I'm like, where were you when I was doing? So it's a, you know, DSpace is really great. The keyword searching is really great. You can find lots of things in there. So the Massachusetts Register. If you're not familiar with the Register, it's published by the Secretary of the Commonwealth's Regulations Division, or Publications and Regulations Division. It's published every 2 weeks. Most importantly, it contains new filings added to the CMR. If you're not familiar with this sort of research, you can kind of think of the filings almost as if you can compare it to like the acts and how they make changes to the general laws. That the filings are kind of like the acts, they make changes to the CMR. And also they include cumulative tables, which I'll get to in a second. They have other materials such as executive orders, hearing notices, bulletins, and other documents. They are important, again, because they include filings, so they're great for tracing changes made to the CMR. And before COVID hit, we were in the middle of scanning and digitizing all of our Massachusetts registers from issue 1 to 2006. And unfortunately, we've had to stop. So I'm not sure when that's going to continue, but hopefully in the near future, we can get at least some of the issues online. Okay. So the cumulative tables, again, I don't know if everybody's familiar with the cumulative tables. Whenever I mention it, sometimes it's like, it's almost like an exotic word to researchers. So they are published every 2 weeks in the CMR, and they track the changes that are made to the CMR over a calendar year. So the library has been saving the cumulative tables since 1978. We've been saving the year's end so that we have the tables that track all the changes that happen during a calendar year. Because once the calendar year rolls over and the new register is published, the CMR starts over, or the cumulative tables start over again. So we've been compiling those, and I ended up a few years ago digitizing them and made them available on DSpace. And I can quickly show you that. Let me just pull up the website. In DSpace, under this the Office of the Secretary of State collection, and so you can find the Massachusetts registers right here from 2007 to current, and then easiest way, there's a direct link in the slides, but if you want to find the cumulative tables, you can just type in cumulative tables and it should bring it right up. We just kind of stuck it with the mass registers. I might make further decisions at a later date where to house them, but so it should have the most current in there from the end of the last calendar year. But if you want to see the most current, you'd have to look at the most currently published mass register, the latest cumulative table. Okay, so let me go back. And to break it down, so this is an example of what you would see if you looked at a cumulative table. This is from earlier this year. I just kind of snagged it from one of the registers. So this is the digit title number, and this is the agency. And these are all of the chapter numbers and the titles to each chapter. And if you don't see a particular chapter that you're researching listed, it means that there was no change. There has not been a change, at least as of this cumulative table. But there was a change, such as 204, 101 CMR 204. Then you can take a look at the filings. It tells you which issue of the mass register to go to for the filings, and it also provides the effective date of those filings. Immediately you can see that the cumulative tables are nothing like an annotated, like a legislative annotated resource. They're not very specific. They're only, for the most part, at the chapter level. So if you're researching anything specific, like a section within the chapter, you have to kind of sift through all the filings to find those filings that are pertinent to what you're researching. So that's kind of the pitfall with this sort of research is that it's not true. It's annotated in a way, but it's not super specific. Okay. And so as Dava and Alex mentioned, we have other resources in DSpace that are really helpful with researching regulations. A lot of researchers want to know, just like with legislation, they want to know intent behind a change. And so the library does not collect the working documents that go into creating regulations. We don't collect red line drafts. We don't collect hearing materials when an agency holds a hearing. But there are a lot of resources that are published by agencies that do discuss regulations and may provide insight into why something was done. Those things are like information bulletins. There's an example of an administrative bulletin, memos, the guidance documents, when something changes and they need to provide guidance to other state employees to understand what they mean with the new regulations, so what needs to be done. Annual reports, meeting minutes, because a lot of times these things are discussed in meetings. And you can also look at the research guide. I have some other resources available on the library's research guide. So that kind of wraps up regulations. Feel free to ask any questions. It's kind of a loaded research topic, so feel free to ask any questions about regulations or if something wasn't clear. I'm going to now talk about special collections that we have in DSpace that can help with state and government legislative research. So our special collections department houses the library's older and more rare book collections, but we also have collections that are in a different format, such as maps, atlases, videos, photographs, manuscripts, scrapbooks, etc. And I often recommend that patrons, when they're done researching, usually patrons come to the main reading room first when they want to do any sort of legislative research or government research. And once they exhaust all of the official and primary and secondary published materials, I then start to have them think about maybe looking at materials in other formats. And I want to say that most of these materials, because they're special collections, are on site. We do have a lot of special collections in DSpace, but specifically collections about legislation or to help legislative research and government research. For the most part, they're on site. And it is good to mention first, you know, what we do have on site. So in the library, we have one of the highest use collections we have are the House and Senate audio and video recordings. These recordings are House and Senate debates. There are a couple other types of recordings and hearings of certain events in this collection, but most of them are House and Senate debates from 1987 to present. And these are only on site. We have a lot of legislators and other state elected officials deposit their papers with our special collections department. So we do have some of these manuscript collections available for researchers. We have a lot of photographs of legislative committees, and we have some files and other records. We have scrapbooks, and we also have the manuscript House and Senate journals. And someone asked in the chat, the manuscript House and Senate journals, there's a certain time period where they are not transcribed and published professionally. I forget exactly what the time period is now. And I think that's it right there, 1780 to 1867. And the library has the manuscript House and Senate journals in its collection. And they have been digitized, but COVID kind of got in the way. We're hoping to put them into DSpace at some point, the actual manuscript as well as a transcription, because they're a little hard to read. So here are our special collections materials in DSpace. We have voting district maps. We have 19th and early 20th century photographs of state legislators and general court staff members. We have guides to the papers of state elected officials and government agencies. And like I said, early manuscript House and Senate journals, hopefully coming soon, we'll see. So voting district maps. This is a common question that we get from researchers looking for trying to understand how Massachusetts was split up during a particular time period. The collection, it contains 29 maps for state representative, senatorial, and congressional districts from 1842 to 2020. Special Collections has actually been working on cataloging their maps and atlases and digitizing them. And so as we come across these, it's a little bit of a slow process for them, but as we come across these, we've been adding them into the collection, into one specific collection in DSpace, just so when someone has a question about voting districts and how they changed over time, you can just send them this collection and be like, here you go. And then here's a link to the collection here. This is one of my favorite collections. It's more of a fun collection of early 19th century and early 20th century state legislators and staff. Staff members include clerks. We have some chaplains and pages as well, and sergeant-at-arms. I think those are the four main staff members that I see in this collection. It's a great collection. It contains about 1,700 professional portrait photographs of state House and Senate members from 1851 to 1908. The formats include tintypes, carte de visites, cabinet cards, and album pages. The best way to search the collection is by the person's name. That's the main access point for this collection. And it's really great. There was a lot of interest in this collection. Sometimes when I'm researching something, I'll stumble upon a website that snagged one of these photographs to use on their website. A lot of these photographs might possibly be the only image of this person publicly available. So there was a lot of interest in this collection. It also helps, verify whether or not someone served in a particular chamber, as well as at a certain time point, or a time period as well. But it's a fun collection just to browse too. And then last but not least, we have the guides to the papers of state elected officials and government organizations. The manuscript collections are not, for the most part, available online, but these guides are available to help researchers figure out what we have, whether or not they should be looking at these collections on site. And they're really great because they provide scope and content, historical context, in case someone isn't familiar with a legislator and what their activities were, or an agency. So these are available in DSpace. There's 57 guides so far for legislators. And then there's a collection for other government entities. It's a much larger collection, but it's kind of a grab bag, so I couldn't give you an exact number of relevant finding aids, but there's a lot in there. And some of them are pretty specific and tell you exactly, almost at item level. So they should really be helpful with at least narrowing down your research and knowing, what collections that you need to take a look at. All right, so that's all I have. Thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us or refer patrons anytime. We are working remotely, but we're working full time. And, you can contact us via our Ask a Librarian web form or our new chat feature, or just via email at reference.department@mass.gov. Our recording of this presentation will be available on our YouTube channel, and slides will be uploaded as a PDF in DSpace within the next day or two. And if you have any interest or any trouble accessing those slides, just let us know. But they'll include all the links available in the presentation. And then if you have any interest in looking at the State Library's history, you can take a look at our Flickr page. There's a lot of images from our collections, as well as the history of the State Library, as well as past exhibits that we've hosted in the library. And then I'll turn it back to Dava.
Thank you, Caitlin. So this concludes our presentation. We have answered, I think, almost all of the chat questions. We either heard from Caitlin or Alex. Are there any more questions? Or did I miss any of the chat questions? It looks like no one has any more questions. Like we said, we can send out the PowerPoints. We'd actually need your, they'll be available in DSpace in a couple of days. If you want them, then I will need your email. You can either email the reference department, reference.department@mass.gov, or if you want to try, your homework assignment could be that you could look for the presentation in DSpace. But if you really want them, please email the reference department, or my email is dava.devanus@mass.gov, which my name is spelled on the front of the slide, so I don't have the most common name, so feel free to dava.devanus@mass.gov. So It looks, thank you very much for your comments. And if a question pops up, feel free to email us, either me, the department, you can chat with us. Anyway, thank you very much for showing up. I'll end it here and stop recording, and have a good day.